Ever feel like you're kind of stuck on this emotional roller coaster, can't get off? Like your reactions are the ones in control instead of you.
Yeah, that's a really common feeling, actually.
Yeah.
Something a lot of people struggle with, feeling overwhelmed by their emotions.
Totally, totally. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah.
We're going deep into Tony Robbins' How to Master Your Emotions.
Oh, great choice.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of extract some actionable strategies that we
Right.
can all use to understand and manage these emotions a little better.
It's a powerful program. It
Yeah.
really gets to the core of
Yeah.
how our emotions work.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear more.
And one of the most interesting things about Robin's approach is that
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't view these so-called like negative emotions as enemies.
Oh, interesting.
Right. He actually reframes them as what he calls action signals.
Oh, action signal.
Yeah, he says they're these valuable messages that are actually
Hmm.
urging us to make a change.
Ooh. So instead of being swept away by, like, let's say anxiety,
Right.
you can actually pause and ask, okay, what is this feeling actually trying to tell me? Like, what action is this prompting me to take?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a huge shift in perspective.
That is a huge shift. So how do we start kind of deciphering these messages? How do we, like, decode them?
Well, Robbins breaks down these action signals into 10 core categories.
Mm.
And I think it would be helpful to explore a few of these
Okay.
that might resonate with your own experiences.
All right, yeah. Let's unpack those. Let's start decoding.
All right. So let's think about a time you felt uncomfortable, right?
Uncomfortable.
Maybe
Okay.
someone made a comment that just rubbed you the wrong way, or you found yourself in a situation
Mm.
that just didn't feel right. Just like this subtle sense of unease, almost like a tiny alarm bell going off
Right.
in your
Like,
mind.
yeah, that's super relatable. We've all had those moments where we just feel like a bit off kilter, a little bit like, something's not quite right here.
Right? It's that internal nudge, like, hey, pay attention.
Exactly.
Something's not quite right here.
So then that discomfort, it's a signal to kind of assess the situation and ask yourself, okay, what needs to change? What action can I take here to feel more like aligned and at ease?
Exactly. It could be anything from, adjusting your boundaries
Mm-hmm.
to communicating your needs more clearly.
Yeah, it's about turning that discomfort into like a catalyst for action instead of just trying to ignore it or push it
Now
down.
let's talk about fear for a second.
Okay, fear.
Fear often gets kind of a bad rap.
Right.
But Robbins, he argues that fear isn't inherently negative. He says it's actually a powerful signal urging us to prepare.
To prepare.
Yeah. Think about it, like fear of failing an exam might motivate you to study harder, right?
Totally. Oh, yeah, for sure. I've definitely used fear as like fuel to get things done.
It can be motivating.
But I also know, yeah, sometimes it can feel so paralyzing instead of motivating.
Absolutely. And that's where understanding, the message behind the fear
Mm.
becomes really crucial.
Okay.
It's not about letting fear dictate your
Yeah.
actions, right? It's
Mhm.
more about using it as information to make more informed decisions.
Right. So it's almost like turning that deer in the headlights feeling into a like strategic plan of action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears to a different emotion now. Let's talk about hurt.
Okay. Hurt.
Think about a time when you felt hurt. Maybe it was a broken promise, a betrayal of trust,
Mm-hmm.
or just a feeling of rejection.
Ooh. Yeah. Hurt can be like a really deeply personal
Absolutely.
and painful experience. I think
Yeah.
we've all been there. We've all felt that sting.
And while it's natural to want to avoid pain, right?
Hmm.
Understanding the message behind hurt, that can actually lead to like profound growth.
Okay.
It might be prompting you to reevaluate your expectations, to communicate your needs more effectively, or even to reconsider, the alignment of a certain relationship.
So it's about instead of just dwelling in that hurt, we can use it as an opportunity to like strengthen our relationships
Thank you.
and set healthier boundaries.
Let's move on to a more fiery emotion. Let's talk about anger.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's often perceived as, destructive.
Hmm.
But Robbins, he suggests that anger, it actually signals a violation of our personal rules or standards.
Oh, it's like that internal code of conduct that we all carry around. And when someone or something crosses that line, boom, anger flares up, like a protective mechanism almost.
Yeah. And instead of letting anger lead to like impulsive reactions, right?
Yeah.
We can decode its message and use it more constructively.
So it's about asking yourself, like, okay, what rule has been violated here? Is this a valid rule that's truly serving me? And how can I address this violation in a way that aligns with, my values and my goals?
Exactly. All right, so let's consider frustration now.
Frustration. Okay.
You know that feeling, like you're hitting a wall, you're trying the same thing over and over,
Oh, yeah.
and you're just not getting anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's a signal that your current approach just isn't working.
Like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, no matter how hard you push, it's not going to budge.
And frustration, it's telling you, hey, get creative,
Mm-hmm.
try a new approach, break this problem down into smaller steps.
Right. So it's really a reminder that sometimes we need to adjust our strategy instead of just like doubling down on the same ineffective tactics.
Exactly. Now think about disappointment. That sinking feeling
Oh,
when
yeah.
things just don't go as planned.
I know that feeling well. It can be so deflating.
Yeah, it's a signal that our expectations haven't been met. But instead of, wallowing in that disappointment,
Right.
we can actually use it as an opportunity to reevaluate those expectations.
Right.
Ask ourselves, were they realistic? Were they aligned with my values?
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything I can learn from this experience to, adjust my approach moving forward?
So disappointment can be a really valuable teacher.
Exactly. Let's tackle a couple of emotions that often carry a really heavy weight. Let's talk about guilt and regret.
Oh, yeah, those are tough ones. They often come with a lot of self-judgment and criticism.
Absolutely. And Robbins, he offers a really insightful perspective here. He argues that guilt, it can actually be a powerful catalyst for growth and change.
Really?
Yeah, it's a signal that we've strayed from, our own moral compass,
Yeah.
and it prompts us to make amends.
Oh, so it's like our internal accountability system,
Exactly.
reminding us to live in integrity.
Now, of course, there are times when guilt is misplaced, right? When we're holding ourselves to like an impossible standard,
Mm-hmm.
or we're blaming ourselves for things that are outside of our control.
Right.
And in those cases, it's really about challenging those beliefs and offering ourselves some compassion.
So it's about kind of discerning whether the guilt is a valid signal or whether it's like a false alarm that needs to be quieted.
Exactly. Let's explore inadequacy.
Inadequacy. Okay.
That feeling of not being good enough, smart enough, capable enough, it often leaves us feeling, discouraged and demotivated.
Oh, yeah. I think we all struggle with those feelings of inadequacy from time to time. It's like that inner critic telling us we're not worthy or deserving.
Yeah, it's a common struggle. But Robbins, he suggests that inadequacy, it can actually be a signal to take action,
Okay.
to improve in a specific area.
Right.
It might be prompting you to, like, acquire new skills,
Well,
seek out mentors,
right.
or just simply challenge those limiting beliefs that are holding you back.
So instead of shrinking back in fear, we can actually use those feelings of inadequacy as like a fuel to step up and grow.
Exactly. And sometimes, it's also about adjusting our perception, right? Recognizing that we might be comparing ourselves to like an unrealistic standard, or focusing on our flaws instead of celebrating our strengths.
It's about finding that balance between self-improvement and self-acceptance.
Okay, now imagine yourself feeling completely overloaded or overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you're swamped, like you're drowning in responsibilities, and there's just no end in sight.
Been there so many times. It's like having a million tabs open in your brain and none of them are loading properly.
Yeah. And when we feel overwhelmed, it's a signal to prioritize, to simplify and focus. It might be time to, delegate tasks,
Right.
renegotiate deadlines, or just create a more structured approach to managing your time and energy.
So it's about taking back control and creating a sense of order in the middle of the chaos.
Exactly. And finally, let's talk about loneliness, that universal human need for connection and belonging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we all crave that connection in different ways, and it's easy to feel isolated, especially in like today's world.
Right. Robbins, he emphasizes the importance of identifying the specific type of connection we're craving,
Right.
and then taking action to fulfill that need.
Okay.
It might involve reaching out to loved ones, joining a community group, or just engaging in activities that bring you joy.
So it's about proactively seeking out those connections that nourish us and remind us that we're not alone.
Exactly. Now, we've covered a lot of emotional territory here.
We have.
But it's important to remember that these 10 action signals, they're just the starting point.
Oh, okay.
The real magic happens when we learn to master them.
Right.
We can transform them from reactive triggers into catalysts for positive change.
That's where things get really interesting. So stay tuned because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore Robin's framework for achieving that mastery.
It's going to be great.
So we've got all these action signals, right? We've kind of decoded the messages behind them. But how do we actually use that information
Right.
to create some real change in our lives? Like it feels like we've identified the problem,
Hmm.
but now we need the solution.
That's where Robin's concept of emotional mastery comes in. It's a framework for shifting from like just reacting to your emotions to actually taking intentional action.
Okay.
And it really boils down to two key paths,
Mhm.
changing our perception or changing our procedure.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I need a bit more clarity on what those terms actually mean. They sound a little technical to me.
No, that's fair. Think of it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you're a photographer
Okay.
and you're trying to capture the perfect shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your camera lens,
Yeah.
that represents your perception. It's how you view the world, your beliefs, your interpretations, your expectations.
So if my lens is like blurry or distorted,
Yeah.
I'm not going to capture a good image no matter how hard I try to like adjust the settings or frame the shot perfectly.
Exactly. And so changing your perception, it involves like cleaning that lens, so to speak.
Okay.
It's about challenging those limiting beliefs, reframing negative thoughts, and adopting a more empowering perspective.
So it's like upgrading to a higher quality lens, one that allows you to see the world more clearly and capture its beauty.
Now, the photographer's actions, right? Adjusting the settings, composing the shot, choosing the right angle
Yeah.
that represents the procedure. It's the actions we take, the behaviors we engage in, the way we
So
communicate.
even if I've got a perfect lens, if I don't know how to use the camera,
Well,
it's
no.
still not going to be a good photo.
Precisely. Changing our procedure, it involves developing those effective strategies for responding to our emotions in a way that's aligned with our values and our goals.
Okay. So it's like mastering the technical aspects
Yes.
of photography, understanding how to use all the tools.
And Robbins emphasizes it's often a combination of both.
Oh, okay.
Adjusting our lens and refining our technique
Hmm.
that leads to true emotional mastery.
Can we get into some specific examples?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, let's say I'm struggling with feelings of inadequacy.
Okay.
How would I apply these concepts to that?
Okay, yeah. So imagine you're feeling inadequate in, let's say, your professional life.
Okay.
Maybe you're comparing yourself to your colleagues
Mm-hmm.
who just seem more successful, more confident,
Yeah.
and you're just feeling a lot of self-doubt.
Yeah. I think we've all been there. It's easy to get caught in that comparison trap,
That's
especially these days
exactly
with
what I
social
do.
media and everything.
Now, from a perception standpoint, right,
Okay.
you might start by challenging those comparisons. Are you comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20?
Oh, that's a good point. It's like comparing apples and oranges.
Right.
We're all at different stages in our journey.
Exactly. And then from a procedural standpoint, you might focus on actually building your skills and confidence, maybe through continuing education, seeking out a mentor,
Okay.
or just taking on new challenges that push you outside of your comfort zone.
So instead of shrinking back, I can take action to actually improve and grow.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. What about anger?
Okay, so remember that scenario Robbins gave where, you come home after a long day
Mm-hmm.
and you're hoping for a nice warm welcome from your partner,
Right.
but they're totally engrossed in their work
Sure.
and they barely acknowledge you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that feeling of disappointment and honestly anger when I feel ignored.
Now, if you just react solely from that anger, right, you might snap at your partner,
Mm-hmm.
withdraw emotionally, maybe even, give them the silent treatment.
Which is probably just going to make things worse.
Exactly. But if you pause and you decode the message behind that anger, you might realize, okay, this is coming from a need for connection
Okay.
and appreciation.
So instead of like lashing out, I could actually just communicate that need directly.
Yes.
I could say something like, hey, I know you're busy, but I could really use some quality time. I miss you.
Exactly. It's about expressing your needs vulnerably rather than letting anger dictate your behavior.
That's a game changer for sure. So we've got these two paths, right? Right.
Shifting our perception and adjusting our procedure. But what happens if we just ignore these action signals altogether?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I feel like ignoring those emotional cues would be like hitting the snooze button on a really important alarm. You get a temporary break, but it's going to come back even louder.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Because just like ignoring an alarm can have negative consequences, so can ignoring these action signals. They don't just go away.
Right, right.
They actually tend to intensify, which can lead to, more pain, more conflict, even some pretty destructive behaviors.
So it's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can keep it down there for a bit, but eventually it's going to pop back up.
Exactly. Our emotions are like messengers.
Okay.
They're delivering important information, and if we just keep ignoring those messages, they're going to have to shout louder to try to get our attention.
And that can manifest in some pretty unhealthy ways, right? Like anxiety, depression, burnout,
Yeah.
relationship issues. Yeah, absolutely. Let's say you're feeling super overwhelmed at work,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of like addressing the issue, setting boundaries, maybe delegating tasks,
Right.
you just keep pushing through, ignoring the pressure.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. It's like that whole hustle culture mentality.
Yeah, and what happens is you hit a wall,
Mm-hmm.
either physically or emotionally. Maybe you have a panic attack,
Right.
you make a big mistake, or
Mm-hmm.
you just burn out completely.
It's like ignoring that check engine light until the car just stops working.
Right. Those action signals, they're there for a reason. They're telling us to do something,
Mm-hmm.
to make a change before things get out of control.
So it's not about pretending we don't have those emotions.
No.
It's about listening to what they're telling us and figuring out how to respond.
Now, Robbins actually takes this concept even deeper with one of his most powerful statements. He says, "Nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning you give it."
Wow, that's pretty profound. It makes me think we actually have a lot more control over our emotions than we realize.
Exactly. He uses the example of dealing with the death of a loved one,
Mm-hmm.
which is, obviously one of the most painful experiences we can go through.
It is. It's something we all experience at some point.
And naturally we experience grief, sadness, loss.
Yeah.
But while we can't control the fact that that loss happens, we can choose how we interpret it and how we respond to it.
So we can dwell in the pain and feel powerless,
Right.
or we can focus on, the love we shared, the memories.
Exactly. It's not about denying the pain,
Right.
but about choosing a perspective that empowers us.
I like that. And that can apply to so many areas of life, right?
Absolutely.
We can see challenges as opportunities, setbacks as lessons,
Yes.
even negative emotions as guides.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
Hmm.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of my emotions.
Me too. So to recap, we've explored those 10 action signals. Uncomfortable, fear, hurt, anger, frustration, disappointment, guilt and regret, inadequacy, overloaded or overwhelmed, and loneliness.
And those are our emotional guideposts.
Yeah, they're telling us when it's time to make a change, either in our perspective or our actions.
Right.
So as you're going through life, pay attention to those action signals, those emotions.
What are they telling you?
What changes are they prompting you to make? And how can you use those messages to really create that more fulfilling, empowered life?
We've given you the tools. Now go out there and master your emotions.